Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stokemeter. Today, we're taking a little different slant on things. We're going to talk about things that we learned in 9/11. A lot of you might not have known, but I'm actually a 9/11 survivor, and it was a crazy day. And Karch was in the middle of that, but he was in Arizona, and it's something that we both learned from. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, I want to interject there, Karch.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a little different than we normally do. I don't think it's just because we're talking with each other and we don't have a guest. Because I guess the thing that really hits me is when you think of 9/11, you don't think of being stoked and you don't think of Stokemeter. But it really is one of those things. And as I was thinking about this, we talked to our different guests. There's so many things that have an impact on our lives that end up being for the good, but at the time pretty much just suck. And I think this really falls into that. And so that's why I was able to kind of wrap my head around this and at least get a little excited about talking about it. But I also think it's important, as we've seen, to just get our stories recorded, right. You know what I mean? So that people can learn from them down the road from the people that were there. And if you think about it, holy crap, that was 20 years ago.
I know, I'm having a hard time believing that. I'm just blown away. I've been receiving a lot of messages in the last couple of days of a lot of fellow survivors, also a lot of friends that knew the story. And it's been refreshing to see that even after 20 years, those bonds of friendship are still there. It was a very unique unifier, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
I'm just thinking, what's the best? Should I just give the account of
yeah, let's just start from that morning.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll start because mine was really kind of boring, but and then I'll just because mine was pretty short. I woke up, and I guess first of all I have to give you a little bit of background as to where I was in my life at that point. So September 11th was obviously on September 11th, but my twins were born, I don't know if you remember, June 1st of that same year.
Oh, dang.
So I remember waking up, or, I was actually kind of up, and, the TV was on, and Julie said, Gary, you gotta see what's going on. And I remember just staring at it and just my stomach just hitting the ground. And the first thing that went through my mind, and I have to apologize, I'm still sick for people, so my voice is a little off. The thing that went through my mind was just sickness as to what was going to happen next. I was already a new father, and it was just terrifying because I think one thing that most people, looking back on historical events, it's hard to get across is at that moment, you don't know what's happening next.
Yeah.
And I wish people could appreciate that more. Is, when you see you hear that these airlines have been hijacked and things are happening and the Pentagon and the Twin Towers, the whole time as it's unfolding, you don't know what the bottom is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was a lesson to me for like historical events, is that when I, try and think about things, like say whether it's World War II or Vietnam or whatever, things that weren't around when I was either too young or wasn't born yet, is I try and put that perspective into it. And it really helps me understand what's going on.
Yep.
So anyway, so that's kind of where I was, and then let's kick it over to you.
Well, at the time I was working down in the Wall Street area. To be exact, it was 160 Water at the time I was working for AIG. And I was on the east side of the building of the 24th floor of 160 Water. And I had arrived there probably just after 8 a.m. on that day. And gorgeous. I mean, it was freaking gorgeous. And I was just hard at work. There was construction going on. And I remember hearing this massive explosion. And the first thought that came to my mind, I kid you not, was those daggum construction dudes, what in the heck are they doing? And so I just carried on. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea what was happening on the other side of the building. And then our executive assistant called me and she said, a plane just ran into into the tower. I go, wait, what? And so I went over to the other side of the building. Of course, everyone's lining up the windows and we're looking and we're talking. And the very first thing that came into my mind was, this is not an accident. There's no freaking way that's an accident. And the first reports was that it was a smaller plane that went in the building. At least that's what was going around on the 24th floor with us. And I said, that's bogus, man. There's no way. So there was this feeling of something's not right here. And so spent a little time visiting with my coworkers and just running through all the different scenarios of how the plane ended up there. And I had a feeling at that time, I gotta go get a camera. Of course, we didn't have these cell phones, right? We didn't have all these cool gadgets. We did. I had a flip phone, a Samsung flip phone that wasn't worth crap. But at the time, the camera would have been useless. So I went on the elevator and went downstairs, bought my camera, a little disposable Kodak camera, if you remember. Actually, they still make some every once in a while, right?
Yep.
And I came back up, and as the elevator door opened, it was mass chaos. People were in such a panic mode. They were trying to get on the elevator. They were jumping out. I'll never forget one of the looks of terror in one of my coworkers' face. Her face just said it all. I go, what the heck just happened? And they said that the plane had hit the South Tower. So I didn't see it. I was in the elevator shaft when it had hit. Well, of course, I'm one of those probably not too smart people. Stayed in the building on the 24th floor and went to the window. And sure enough, the smoke had just started, and I started clicking away. And there was probably about 5 of us left. One of them was ex-military veteran, and he had binoculars. I couldn't believe it. He had binoculars. So we're looking at what's going on. And of course, by that time, you could looking down on the street, just people were just in all sorts of commotion. But a few minutes after I was up there, the security came up and they started kicking us out. And so I went down. Well, here's the other kicker is my subway station was at Fulton Street. And Fulton, well, actually, to be exact, Day Street and Broadway, if anyone's been there, that's 100 yards away from ground zero. So, of course, I'm walking toward it. And as I'm walking toward it, I'm still snapping shots. And about that time, you started seeing the jumpers. And that's just something that you'll never get out of mind. And I remember just my heart just being ripped and understanding that there was no one started the day thinking that they would expect any of that. Well, as I got toward my subway stop, I was speaking with a lot of folks, and one of them was a couple from Germany, and they were there on vacation. I mean, welcome to New York, right?
Yeah, really.
And they didn't know what to do, so we chatted a little bit. What the possibilities were that where they could potentially go at this time. They were trying to head back up to their hotel and such. But what I started to see is after the initial fear started to dissipate, at least for the time being, there was this feeling of caring for other people. That, I mean, this is New York City, and I'm going to expound on that a little bit more in a minute here. But about that time, I arrived right. So for those of you who've been in New York City, I was right behind Century 21, not the real estate department. It's actually a high-end fashion store, a discount store, if you will. And so again, 100 yards away from ground zero. And I'm taking pictures, talking with other folks down there. And a few minutes later, I heard an explosion. And I thought, I'm dead. I'll never forget it. That was my exact thought. I'm dead. And so there was a strange feeling. It wasn't fear, it wasn't panic. It was just this calm thing. I can't do anything about this, and I am going to accept my fate. And I literally pointed my camera up and started clicking just a little bit. And then I'd have to say this is 30, 40-story building. All of a sudden, the first plume came over. And I thought, oh man, I've got to run, man. And so I turned around and I started sprinting. And the feeling was just, when I say feeling, the actual tactile feeling, the debris started catching up with me. And pretty soon it really started to envelop my vision. But the thing that I remember feeling was the debris was so warm. It was grossly warm. And so at the time that the debris was starting to engulf me, I took a look to my left and I saw a building and I bolted for it. So I made it in the door. And when I was in the door, by that time, it was a literal blackout outside. It looked like an ant farm. So, when you're looking at an ant farm, the sand is all there. That's what it looked outside. And there are a couple of videos that actually captured how it went from light to darkness in an instant. But the other thing that I remember is that there were people that were knocking on the door, and it was so dark that you could just see their fists in their face as they went in there. So we let them in, and all of a sudden there are probably about 20 of us in this building. That exact building was 11 John Street, and I know a lot of my friends would start to send me scriptures related to John chapter 11. But anyway, that being said, when we were captured there, there was a new sense of panic. And I remember that everyone was consoling each other, and there were people that were in hysterics, of course. I was just there, I didn't know what to think, man. I really didn't know what to think. And I didn't have time to not think for too long, because we realized that one of the individuals in our group was asthmatic, and we needed to get her up to cleaner air. So counterintuitively, we started to walk upstairs and just to get in cleaner air. And of course, it was the South Tower that fell first, so we had no idea what was happening with the North Tower. And we just knew that we needed to communicate. A few of us again had flip phones. Not everyone had flip phones back then, but we went to an office over there, and I was about to I saw a row of phones, and I was about to try to knock in the door, because we needed access to those phones. There were some that really needed to call their families and loved ones. And so as I'm about to get my Leatherman, I had a Leatherman on me, and I was going to just chuck it through the glass door. There was a dude behind me, and he said, "Sir, step aside." And I looked back, and it's an NYPD guy in plain clothes with his Glock out. And I thought, "I'm sorry, man." But it wasn't those. He goes, I stepped aside, and the dude double tapped it, 2 shots right through the door. And I'm the only idiot there that was cheering, like, "Oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen." Right? And so even in the midst of this craziness, there were still some points of, man, I got to latch onto that was actually pretty cool. And so we kicked down the door, we got in, and we started calling. And while we were calling, it was amazing to hear the conversations that they were having with loved ones. They were letting them know that they were okay, but the profuse amount of feeling that they were talking with their family members was very it left a very strong impression on my mind. Now, as everyone's adrenaline was coming down and they were having conversation with their loved ones, I remember precisely what I was looking at outside, because you started to see the vision coming back. The debris had started to dissipate a little bit. There was still a lot of it, but you could still see. And it came to mind who did it. I knew without a doubt who did it. And so this whole range of emotions, you go from what a beautiful day to, oh my gosh, this is a tragedy, to, ooh, we're relieved, to now all of a sudden the daggum thing's collapsing. And then you're going upstairs and you're hearing all these heartfelt conversations. And then I remember the intense anger that I felt. If you would have put a gun in my hand, I would have went to war right there that day. Actually, that second, because I've never felt since that time that degree of anger toward anybody, and it was very revealing of the human nature. Well, about that time, we had some EMTs that were in the building with us, and they go, "We have to evacuate. We've got to get going right now. We can't stay here for very much longer." And they arranged us in pairs, and what they did is we were assigned to different people, and we would hold hands as we were leaving the building, in the event that if something happened, if we got lost or whatever it might be. So we got out there, and if I remember right, the dude's name was Steve, and we were talking about our families. Well, actually, I wasn't married at the time. I was talking about, dadgummit, I wish I had a family. But anyway, so Steve and I went out, and the other people that were started going in front of us, there were a few behind us, and it was a literal war zone. When we ran into it, the streets were completely black, the blacktop, the whole bit. When we got out, I should just get the shoes. I kept my shoes. It was about that deep of ash and soot, and it was dirt in color, and it was freakishly warm still. But as we were pushing through it, I just remember the fine ash just puffing. And matter of fact, if you look at some of my pictures, you'll still see, as I was taking shots, you could still see all of the ash falling on people in front of you. And so really weird. And the other thing that I remember is there were so many high heels that were dispersed along the road. You just can't run in high heels. So there are a lot of things that stood out in my mind. And we were heading east toward the East River, toward the Brooklyn Bridge. And I ran into this woman that was barefoot. She was barefooted, and we just started to talk about the events, and she was mentioning, yeah, I had to get rid of my shoes, and now, and I'm sure she's probably carrying sneakers wherever she goes now. And it was just one of those situations that you started to really learn about people, because they were in a very vulnerable. They were in two states. They were ticked, they were vulnerable, or somber. And so a lot of the discussions that I had with fellow survivors was, dang, man, this is nuts, right? And then once that initial conversation stopped, it was what was most important to us. And so anyway, and I'll get back to that in a minute and interject anytime you want to. But as the walk continued, I was way down in downtown. I had to get to the 90s on the east side. So it was, I would say, probably about 5-6 mile walk. And as I was going through Chinatown and Little Italy, and then Union Square, and then hitting Midtown, and then Uptown, I just remember the the amazing thing was seeing how people came together to help each other. And so if you've ever been to New York, no one lets you use their bathrooms. I actually saw service stations, restaurants, stores, people all up that all the way on the way back home. There are people that had those 10-gallon water buckets outside so people could get water. There were people that were opening up their bathrooms so that people could use them on their way home. There were people offering their phone to help contact a loved one. I even saw one, it was a work truck. I don't know if it was a Central Park truck or what have you, but it was some kind of work truck. And it had the laborers in there. It had people in suits and ties and dresses because they were taking them up and down that street. Again, you'd never see that. And it was such a unique moment of people coming together and really caring about each other. Despite this tremendous tragedy, it brought all these people together, and they were every nationality, they were every color, they were every socioeconomic group. There wasn't any division. The only color that mattered that day was red, because everyone bled red, right? And it was so amazing to see that. And I have not since seen something like that. And it was amazing what the city felt like after that, because there was so much caring. There was so much concern about other people. It wasn't about Wall Street making millions of dollars. It was about caring for other people. And again, I'll never forget that feeling of unity. It was something that I still talk to a lot of friends about today. So while the emphasis is on the tragedy of 9/11, especially 20 years later, I see a unique spin on it, as well as that it was also something that brought us together. And it was amazing. Anyway, so that's what happened in 9/11
Well,
to me.
I'm curious. So, like, when you were in the, when you ran into that building, you guys you didn't really have access to media at that point, did you? You weren't getting news reports or anything.
No. Oh, heck no.
Well, I say that. I mean, you got to think about that. That's, again, hindsight is 2020. It probably was kind of terrifying just not knowing anything.
Well, one thing that I failed to mention as we were coming out, we all knew that it wasn't long before the second tower collapsed. And so going back to the media, we didn't hear those news reports. So there was that kind of knowing, but it wasn't clarified. So when the second building fell, the North Tower fell, it was, I don't know, there was a knowing that it was going to happen. It's just this somber acceptance. But I don't know if the news would have sensationalized it. So in a sense, I'm kind of glad I didn't have all those reports.
Yeah, no, that would have been kind of weird. The thing I thought about too was and I don't know how, I'm not a physics major or anything like that, but when I saw those towers, and when the first one went down, and then when the second one got hit, it also makes you wonder, like, if that thing would have fallen sideways.
And here's the thing. That's why I thought I was toast, right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was going to go this way, north, south, east, or west. No way in my dreams did I think it was going to come down on itself, right?
Sure.
So when I heard the building collapsing, I had assumed that it was going to fall one of those other ways, not down on itself. Mm-hmm. If it would have fallen any other way, it would have been much more catastrophic. The buildings next to it were all high rises, and even if it went to the west side, that was the financial center over there. It was insane. If it would have fell north, that would have been another potential domino effect. It would have, again, it would have been catastrophic because there were so many people when we were all by there waiting for subway stations, subway stops. No one could have ever have imagined that
Yeah.
that would have happened. No one, no one.
What do you remember the smells?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was I I wish that everyone could not, well, not, I don't wish it upon anyone. The only way I could describe it is that it was like burning asphalt.
Mhm.
And I don't I didn't think I didn't think it was possible to smell burning asphalt. I didn't even know it burnt. But if that's what it's, if that's probably what it is, having been around some cement and stuff before, it was just highlighted by it was a higher intensity as well. That smell.
I think that's something, I mean, it sounds minor, but that's something I think that gets missed a lot of times. It's just that whole, your senses just getting, excuse me, absolutely bombarded
Oh yeah.
by the event and what's going on. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That you just can't capture unless you were there. You know,
No.
as I said, the sitting at home, I think in some way we were getting inundated in a whole nother way that you didn't experience, and that we were getting everything live and the confusion from media and what was going on. Because again, at this point, nobody knew what was happening. And yet you were hearing that, here's another plane that got hijacked. The Pentagon just got hit. They're headed toward the White House. I don't know, you remember that portion of it as
Yes.
well. But I think the thing, and you touched on this a little bit, and I don't want to dwell on it too much because I'll start crying, is is hearing the bodies hitting the ground.
Yeah. 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 It was it was awful. It was awful.
Horrible.
It was incredibly horrible.
And at first, like you said, a lot of the reporters and stuff didn't even know what was going on.
No,
And
no.
so they would just let it play. And anyway, and some of that stuff, from what I understand, you don't even see anymore, even on like YouTube and stuff. It's just
No,
gone. And
no.
then I'll through all that. Um, I'm sick. I'm just sick.
Yeah.
So. But I remember, we talked about this later on, is the thing that was hard for me too is you were the closest person I knew that I knew you were down in that area.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean? And a lot of it is just that unknown. And I can only imagine, all the thousands and thousands of people that didn't know what was going on and what the outcome was. And for you and I, obviously, it was a very positive outcome.
Yeah.
Holy crap, can you imagine, those that didn't have a good outcome?
It was something that impacted lives literally for decades, perhaps even up to now. One of my friends lost her boyfriend in that, and I'll never forget that degree of grief that she felt. It was it was a depth of grief that I've never seen in my life. And just to offer that comfort and support as much as I could from a friend perspective. And you saw that happening over and over and over again. But it really was something that you can't justly describe it unless you experienced it. And the thing that at least a lot of my friends did, we turned off the news. I mean, you can only see the plane go into the stupid building. Oh,
Yep.
you don't need it over and over and over again. I mean, we had immediate closure. We saw what had happened. And the last thing that we wanted to do is to see it going over and over and over. And then just it starts to multiply the amount of grief, angst, and everything. Just turn it off, man. And that's one thing. One of the lessons learned is sometimes you got to turn it off. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree.
but you got to turn it off. But I guess
There's something else that kind of hit me. and this may seem kind of weird, but
Uh-huh.
just follow me.
Yeah.
Is you were saying that there was a point where it hit you where you knew exactly who did this.
Oh yeah.
And at that point you were like, give me a gun and I'm going to go after whoever did it.
Mhm.
And it reminds me of, and this is where we're going to take a little bit of a leap. And I think you'll see where I'm going with this. It's one of the things that we have to be so careful as a human species. And what came to my mind was the Japanese concentration camps
Mhm.
of World War II,
Yep.
where all of a sudden you had an enemy,
Yep.
and anyone that fit that description is now the enemy.
Yep.
And I had there was a gal I grew up with in my little hometown of Benson, Arizona. Her mom she was actually born in the concentration camps, but her mom, was in there.
Yeah.
And here's somebody who took kind of a really bad situation, and she was just the most positive,
Yeah.
happy, coolest person in the world. But one of the things that this is what reminded me when you were talking about it is we have a tendency, I think, as people to paint people with a wide brush.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was one of the things that was kind of, from a psychological perspective, very interesting to me about the whole 9/11
Yeah.
was there was that tendency as well.
Mhm.
Now, anybody that looks like that, talks like that, or whatever, I hate,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And so I
It's
don't know.
well, it's an interesting take. I mean, heck, look at me. I'm Japanese, right?
Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly.
And so my dad and his family, of course, were living here. My dad was quite a bit older. He had me when he was 47. So he was actually a World War II veteran. And growing up, he grew up in Utah. And of course, when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, anti-Japanese sentiment was all over the place. But one thing that he taught me is he he was a freaking stunt, first of all. But what he did is their family, fortunately, did not go to those camps, but he still had a choice, and he wanted to fight for his country. So he became they call it legendary, but he joined the Japanese American Army unit, the 442nd and the 100th Battalion in World War II, and they sent him into some gnarly stuff. And I mean gnarly stuff, Battle of the Bulge, Battle of Lost Battalion, that kind of stuff there. And they lost a good amount of people. And it was my dad it was in a number of different pictures that you can see from a historical perspective. I didn't even know that until my sister pointed it out. He died with shrapnel in him when he died years later of cancer, and he came back home with 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. But he never displayed any of that. First of all, I didn't even know what World War II really was until later on in high school. And my teachers would tell me, well, your dad was in World War II. Oh, yeah, man, he was in World War II. But I would never get those stories of hate, of anything that was negative. Uh, and trust me, he got it.
Yeah,
Right?
he got,
He
yeah,
was
exactly.
he got it. But what he taught me was you got to go prove yourself. And the motto of the 442nd was go for broke. And go for broke basically means in a gambling thing that you just go for broke, man. Put it all in, baby. But in for them, go for broke means putting it all on the line, even your life, for your family, for your friends, for your country, for your loyalty, and your dedication to a country that gave you a lot of good stuff. And so I remember when I first started getting picked on in school, and it was one of those things that they would always call me names. And they weren't nice names, right?
Yeah.
And always had to do with my race. And so I came back down, Dad, I don't know what's going on. And he basically looked at me and he goes, you got to toughen up. We got to toughen you up. And very lovingly, it wasn't in your face type of thing. And he put me in judo. And I'll never forget the day I flipped my first bully. It was awesome. Incredible. And it was one of those things that he utilized as a catalyst to teach that you don't have to be a victim, dude. Do something about it. Do something about it, and treat other people with dignity and respect. And eventually, it'll be returned to you in kind. And so, to your point, the anger I felt in 9/11, it was definitely toward one of an individual. I knew right away who the mastermind was. But to your point, the danger in being guided by anger is always a bad proposition. It's
Yeah.
always a bad proposition, because it's just like when my lawnmower didn't start yesterday. I wanted to crank that bad boy. If I would have done it, I would have broke it, because I took off the top and realized it was just a simple thing. And if I would have kept on cranking, it would have completely annihilated that part of my lawnmower. And so it's just that thing, to your point, to step back and to understand what you stand for. Now, I'm the biggest hypocrite ever, man. I've been guided by anger in some circumstances that has been so stupid. But the thing that 9/11 taught me is that, well, there's a few important things. One is our time is incredibly short. You never know when it's going to go away. Second one was, holy moly, loved ones, my goodness, that they became so important. Even though I didn't have a family of my own at the time, I knew that I wanted to become the person that would be someone that they would appreciate. I'm sure that my kids would go, Dad's still a jerk sometimes, but that's okay. But and then the other thing though too is, I've always been a spiritual person, but understanding there's a higher source, and to let that higher source be a guide, it's tremendously important. It's tremendously important. I've tried to apply it throughout my life, and it's those things that if you're passionate about something, you also look at it and you balance it with what is going right, because what you might need to adapt to, or change. Right? It's interesting, but I know I just went on a massive tangent myself. So
Hey, we can do that, man. We're running the show.
yes.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, but it is amazing though too, because I look at all my friends that were inspired that day. A number of them joined the military. A number of them changed their course in their careers. It took me a while. I started a doctorate program in educational, not education, but organizational psychology, with the intent to do some things in the university. And all of those were great paths that were inspired by that event. Though I'm not doing that, I'll tell you what, I've adjusted in a way that it's been a good life, man.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I remember as kind of the aftermath of that event that was such a positive thing was, like you said, everyone, not just in New York, but nationwide, came together. I mean, that was definitely the high point in my life so far, where people were proud to be an American, and people were like, that it didn't matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat or whatever else. All that kind of went away. And it was amazing. I mean, it was such a positive thing at the time.
Yes.
And that's one of the things, like now that 20 years later, there's so much confusion. And again, and I don't want to get into politics. I hate politics. But
same.
But but like, for example, I had a border patrol buddy of mine come by a couple of weeks ago, and he's just like, dude, I need to talk, man. He goes, I'm just really struggling. He goes, it's so hard when, the things that you were raised, that now all of a sudden are being turned upside down, whether it's, being an American,
Mhm.
being patriotic, um, respect for law enforcement, all these different things that used to be people were proud of,
Mhm.
and that they well, yeah, just proud. And when I say pride, I mean pride in the most positive way.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that if there was something I wish we could learn from 9/11 again, and that there was that narrow window, and it didn't last long,
No, no. I
unfortunately.
mean, just remember, I went back to Wall Street. Financial collapse came in 2008. I mean, that's
Yeah, yeah,
but it's interesting because it didn't just extend to this country. After 9/11, a couple months afterward, you remember everyone was paranoid of flying. It was the travel industry took a hit,
yeah.
and we decided, a bunch of friends, to go to Ireland just a couple months after 9/11. And the plane, everyone was there was a different feeling on that plane. I'm not gonna lie, there was a different feeling.
Sure.
But when we landed, I'll never forget the uh, the stoke that people felt when they landed, and they clapped, and it was one of those, yeah, job well done, pilot. Just little accolades like that. That was so cool. And then I'm in Ireland, and of course they look at me and they forget, hey, look, Japanese junior. Right? But I started talking, and they quickly realized that I was a state from the States. And what was cool were so many people were checking up on to see how we were doing. Right? It was
Yeah,
really neat. So it extended across the ocean to other countries. That the degree of empathy that I felt over in Ireland was really, really cool. And so coming back from Ireland to the States, it was something that touched the chord across the world. And to your point, it was it was, even though it was catastrophic, there were so many things that were a unifier about the event as well. And again, not to take away from the tragedy and all, but just as part of the lessons learned, it made me think from a higher place, and I think it made a lot of people think from a higher place, right?
yeah, I think so. I think, was it Saturday, or when it was 9/11? This is actually this is 9/14, so we did a couple
Yeah,
days
it was
after.
on
And I'm actually,
Saturday, right? Nine
yeah,
11, right?
yeah, and I'm actually glad we're doing it a couple of days after, because I didn't want this to feel like we were kind of taking advantage of the day or anything like
Sure.
that.
Yeah,
I'm actually kind of glad we're doing it now.
right.
Um, but I looked at like Julie, she was just a mess all day long,
Uh-huh.
and she, watching the documentaries and all that type of stuff is, you know, 20 years later, I was reflecting on Saturday of like, okay, where am I at with
Right.
that event?
Right.
Where am I? And I think on a very, very positive note is I'm to the point where I'm grateful for the lessons learned.
Right.
And I have to say, I'm actually happy that I was able to not only learn those lessons, but integrate them into my life.
Oh, yes.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
so instead of, I think I'm over, like you said, a lot of the horrible stuff, I've just shut off.
Yep.
And I don't know if I'm ever going to open that door ever again. I don't need it. It
No,
does me no good.
it really isn't. It's just like harping on some mistake over and over and over again.
Hmm.
You use it as a catalyst to propulse you to another level, to utilize that learning to continue to progress. But to dwell on, forget about it. It does no one any good. Matter of fact, I utilized 9/11, if you remember right, correctly. I was married within 6 months after
Yeah.
that. Man. Not saying that something like that should be a catalyst for that, but I took it a little bit more seriously, man. And if there's anything that came of that day, I mean, I have 4 kids as a testament to that, man. Just utilize that as a learning. Don't utilize it as somewhere you dwell and stay fixed and focused that leads you to no good thing. Utilize it as something that will propulse you, to inspire you in other things, understanding that time is short, understanding that there are people to impact in a positive light, right?
Yeah. Well, I think this is something that you and I have probably just naturally, it's been a part of who we are even before 9/11, but just that way of looking at people for who the individual is.
Yes.
And again, you talked about that a little bit, as things were happening and as things were unfolding and the events that happened afterwards. New York is the epitome of leave me alone and let me just do my thing. But at that moment, it was there were no barriers, there were no races, there was no color, there was no, I don't care if you're a lawyer or whatever. You know what I mean? And as that's one of the cool things about our Stokemeter podcast is as we talk with all these different people, and again, I say this over and over again, but the people that seem to be the happiest and the most successful are able to look at people for who they are, even if they're imperfect. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to throw out the entire person because of a bad trait or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it goes deeper than even, some people hate people for the color of someone's skin, which is absolutely unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because you're missing out so much on what that person has to offer. But even down to, they don't think the way I do.
Mm-hmm.
You're just missing out on so much. So, I remember, in talking with you afterward, that was one of the things that kind of kept coming up in our conversations way back then.
Yeah.
Was you were like, all of a sudden, it was like, we're Americans and we're New Yorkers.
Yeah. Yep.
Period.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And how cool is that?
It was pretty cool, man. It was pretty cool. But no, there's lessons learned that I hope they help others as well. So anyway, well, it's been a good chat.
Well, I appreciate you talking about it. And again, sorry I'm talking while I'm sick because my emotional.
Oh no, it's good, man.
Apologize. But anyway, for everybody listening, thanks for listening. Again, this probably isn't our normal, Stokemeter stoked topic, but I think it was important to talk about. And I appreciate you sharing your experience. And I'm glad we were able to finally get it down.
Yeah.
And again, I've after knowing you for so long, there were things again that I didn't know that it happened. Like, you've never really laid it out like you did today. So that's pretty cool.
Well, thanks, man.
You got it.
Well, let's keep it going. Thanks, everyone.
You bet. Have a good one.